Hello, I think this is my first tutorial on a grid trading robot. Most people would know what grid trading is, and today I'm just going to cover the standard grid trader where it trades up and down, buy and sell at every level, because that will be a foundation for the future work that I do on grid trading robots. There are some variations and I've got some interesting ones coming. But just in case you're not familiar with grid trading, I've drawn a simple diagram here. You can see that I've drawn a grid. Lines on the screen here, equal distance. I think I set these at 200 points apart. So here at the start of grid trading, point number 1, I would open a buy and a sell trade. From here the price rose and crossed this level on the grid, and there I would close the buy because it's in profit, but at the same time I would open another buy and another sell. So I still have a sell open from point 1 and now a sell from point 2. The price then comes down to here, point 3, where it crosses this line on the grid again. There I would close the sell that I opened at point 2, so that's another profit taken. The sell from point 1 is still open, but it's now break even because it's come back to the same level. The buy from point 2 is open and it is now in loss because we've come down to point 3. From here I can see that the price fell to this point 4, and here I would close the sell that was opened at point 1, so that's another profit. At the same time I would open a buy and a sell here, so I have now a buy opened at point 2, at point 3 and at point 4, and I have a sell open from point 4. Then the price rose to point 5, so this sell from point 4 stays open. I can close the buy that I opened at point 4, so that's another profit. The buy from point 3 is at break even and the buy from point 2 is a loss, and then the price fell to point 6 and so on. And so what I'm doing at each level is I'm closing the trade that's in profit and opening another trade, and I'm opening trades in the opposite direction. Obviously in this simple example here you would come out in front, not by a lot, but you would come out in front. But if there is a significant trend you can leave a lot of positions behind, and that's the disadvantage of grid trading. That, for example, down here at point 4 I had buy trades open here that added to more than the profit that I had made so far. So you need to be able to withstand some drawdown if you're going to grid trade. But today we'll look at the standard grid trading that I've just described, and some of the variations that we'll get to in future tutorials will help to deal with those drawdowns. I am going to be using the framework version 3, which I introduced in the last video. I will leave a link to that video or the playlist with that video on screen and in the description below, and you can download the framework from GitHub. There will also be a link for that. Now to start with, I have modified the framework slightly, and so I have created framework version 3.01, and this is because I'm saying that framework 3 is immutable. I'm not going to change that any further, and I've had to make some changes because this is being used now in the grid expert that I'm going to be creating. And when I created framework 3, if you saw that video, it really does nothing. It was the basic starter of the framework. So I expect that there'll be more and more versions coming as I incorporate more features. First change I've got is this framework, and if you saw the last video, the framework is here as a single point where you can simply load this framework.mqh and it will find the most recent version of framework to load into your project. I've made a change to this because I'm now going to be able to use this to load any version of the project simply by specifying inside your project which version you want, and so I had to make some changes here. Now because there is only one of these, I don't have an old version, so I've kept one here called framework_old, and I'll just open that and put the two side by side. So this is the old framework, which would always try to load the most recent framework and take care of setting versions here. The new framework file simply attempts to load each version in sequence, beginning with the most recent and counting down. So when I get to 3.02, I'll simply put another line at the beginning here. And these framework files now will take care of setting indicators such that it won't load any further frameworks as soon as it finds the one that you want. Let me open these framework files so that you can see the difference there. So that framework file that we're referring to inside 3.01 framework.mqh. Here we are, framework 301 framework.mqh. I'll open that. Let me just close these. And I'll also open framework. Now, this is the version 3 framework file, which included this framework version, which I've done away with now. And that would take care of comparing the version that you have already set with the framework that's being loaded, and simply crash the compiler if you tried to load files from 2 different frameworks. I don't think that's necessary, so I've removed it. I'm still having standard include statements here. In the new version of framework.mqh, I have this if not defined framework underscore version. So it's a single compiler variable called framework underscore version. So if that's not defined, then I'll define it. And then I will define another that is called framework underscore version underscore 3 underscore and whatever version number we're up to. And then I can simply wrap the rest of the code in this framework file in the ifdef framework version 301, which means this will simply not be included if I have a different version of the framework. Now, at the moment I've left this framework 3 as it was, but if you download this from GitHub, I will have modified the version 3 framework to be the same structure as this, because I need them to be the same to work with the standard framework file. All this will mean is that if you set a specific version of the framework inside your expert, that version will be loaded by, let's go back to here, that version will be loaded in sequence until eventually you come to a point where that definition is already set, and then it will load the files for that, but it will only load the files for that version of the framework. If you don't set anything inside your expert, then it will obviously pick up the most recent, and you'll just get the most recent framework loaded. And now I've just loaded the file for CommonBase, which is inside framework CommonBase. It's in both frameworks, because there is a small change here. Let me get them lined up side by side. Apart from small cosmetic differences and changing version numbers, I have removed this trade allowed function. So the trade allowed function would call a number of indicators inside the platform to determine whether you have expert trading allowed for the platform, whether it's allowed by your broker, whether it's allowed by this expert. I have moved that now into this ExpertBase.mqh file, mainly because I think it will only ever be used inside an expert, and so I'm bringing it down the stack of objects as far as it needs to go. So I've simply removed that from here, and that's the only significant change inside CommonBase. So now looking at ExpertBase, because there are some changes here. On the left I have version 3, and on the right 3.01. Ignoring the cosmetic differences, I've removed this include framework version because that's no longer needed. I've added in the include of trade.mqh. I described this last time. This is a way of making the trade object common between MetaTrader 4 and 5. So MetaTrader 5 includes a trade.mqh file in its standard include files. I have a wrapper file that I use for 4 and 5. It adds some additional features, but also implements features for MetaTrader 4, because MetaTrader 4 doesn't have that trade.mqh file naturally. Down here inside the expert, because I've included the trade.mqh, now I can declare a ctrade custom, which is inside trade.mqh, and so you probably need to see the earlier video. And I've just called that trade, and CPositionInfo custom, which I've called PositionInfo. Now, I may include more of these in the future, but this is as much as I need, and as I said earlier, I'm only doing as much as is needed in these files each time to cope with the work that I'm doing. I've also added in these definitions, a double, string and long for the order size, trade comment and magic number, because I find I use those very often in my experts. So I'm just putting it here in the base, and that way it's always available. If I choose not to use them, then they simply won't be used, but they will be available here for anything that inherits from ExpertBase. I've also incorporated a first time variable here, which I can use if I want to do some processing the first time a tick is handled by the expert, as opposed to processing when I initiate the expert. And you may have heard me mention before, sometimes if you restart MetaTrader, it can begin the expert before you actually have a connection to the broker. So I can use this first time to do things where I know that I want to have a connection to the broker, because this will only happen when a tick occurs, and that can't happen until the connection to the broker is made. I've also got this MQL so that's a structure, mLastTick, and I'm going to use that to simply grab the last tick information on each loop through the onTick function. I've added these functions, close all, which will close all trades of a given type, and here is the closing price. So for the matching trade, well, for the matching magic number and symbol, this will close all of the trades of that position. Then I also have setup and loop, which are used by the other functions later. Now, setup and loop are virtuals, as is close all, so they can be overridden in the child classes. And for setup and loop, I just have a return statement here in this base class. So I'm expecting that they will either be not used or overridden in the child classes. Put the windows side by side again. Then I still have the onInit, onDNit, and onTick, which are going to be called by the expert from these same named event handlers. And they exist in both versions. And then here is the trade allowed function that I've moved from CommonBase. In ExpertBase now, because the constructor has changed, I've got this new constructor where I allow you to set the order size, trade comment, and magic number. So I now have two constructor functions. Here is the default constructor, which calls the other constructor, passing in 0 for the order size, an empty string for the comment, and 0 for the magic number. And then here is the constructor that takes order size, trade comment, and magic number, and all I'm doing is setting those member variables. And then I'm setting the magic number inside the trade object. So trade.setExpertMagicNumber. And then I set first time to true. So this default constructor simply calls this constructor with default arguments. I've filled out the onTick function a little more. So if trade is not allowed, then return, because if trading is not allowed, there's nothing you can do. So I simply don't bother to waste time on the tick any further. Here is my call to setup if this is first time, and it's the responsibility of the setup function to turn off this first time value if it is set. And then this is where I grab values for that last tick member. So using the SymbolInfo.tick function, passing in the symbol for this expert, and that will populate the last tick variable. And if that fails, then I just return, because if I can't get last tick information, I really can't do anything more. And then I call a function called loop, which you'll see here is defined with just a return statement. So if you haven't overridden this in a child class, it won't do anything. But loop is intended to take care of the processing for the onTick. And then trade allowed, this is just the function that I moved from common, and it simply tests terminal info integer, MQL info integer, and so on to see if trading is allowed in each of those values. And now if I just go back to this diagram for a moment, when you think about it, I was talking about at each of these levels, I'm opening a buy and a sell. When it reaches a profit for a level, I close whichever trade is in profit and open another trade moving in the same direction. If you think about that, then instead of treating this as a grid of buy and sell, I can treat it as two independent grids, one being only buy and one being only sell. And that actually makes it easier for me to write the code for this. And what I'm going to do is define those as legs. So I have a buy leg and a sell leg. And the buy leg simply opens a trade at each level and closes a trade that's in profit. The sell leg does the same thing, but in the opposite direction. And that's much simpler than dealing with the conditional statements to have all of this processed at one time. Let's go back to the code, because that has led me to introduce this class, which I'm calling LegBase. It's here in the expert. I'm including ExpertBase because a leg is really just an expert, but in a single direction. So C LegBase has public inheritance from C ExpertBase. The only additional significant piece of information I'm adding is the LegType, which is going to be buy or sell. So I'm using PositionType for that, mLegType. And then the constructor is the same as the constructor for an expert, but I've added this enum position type LegType. And then in the constructor, I'm simply calling the parent constructor with this colon C ExpertBase, passing the order size, trade comment, and magic. And then I'm setting the member variable for LegType, which is defined inside this class. So by inheriting from CExpertBase, I'm getting all the value of the functions in ExpertBase and all the member variables, and I only have to implement as much as I've added with this leg. Now those are the changes in the framework. So let's move on now and see how I've written the actual expert to perform the grid trading. Now to start, here is GridTrader v1.mq5, so this is the MetaTrader 5 version, the usual statements, properties, copyright link, etc. And then I include GridTrader v1.mqh. If you haven't seen my videos before, I do this quite often because I like to write my code once for MetaTrader 4 and 5. So I've written just this much in the MQ5 file and included this GridTrader v1.mqh, which will be common between the MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5 versions. Here's the MQ4 file, which I can't compile at the moment because I'm in the MQL5 editor, but it's the same and includes the same file. So now here's my GridTrader v1.mqh. And I'm calling this v1 because, as I said, there are variations on grid trading and I'll be releasing more grid trading videos this year. So I've included the standard property statements again here, although they have no effect inside the MQH file. This is where I'm setting the framework I'm using. I know this was written for framework version 3.0.1, so I need to define two things. I define framework _version _3_01, and I also just need to define framework _version. This one simply says I've set the framework version, and this one defines which version of the framework I've set. So by doing that, I can then simply include Orchard Frameworks framework, and that will bring the appropriate file in. Alternatively, I could have included Orchard Frameworks framework 3.01 framework.mqh. So there are two different ways to do it. Let me show what that would look like. So if I have my include statement here saying framework 3.01 framework.mqh, sorry, it needs to be framework _. Right. Then that will load this file, which will take care of that definition of framework version and framework version number for me as well. It's just an alternative method for setting the framework number. Now, for grid trading, I really only have one input that's significant to the grid trader, and that's how far apart those levels need to be. So input level points, 0. So I'm setting this to 0, which means that this expert won't work out of the box, and I'm doing that because it's up to you to make this work. I am not offering this as a working expert because I don't want anyone to be trading this. I am not offering any kind of advice. So I've set this to 0 by default. If you choose to change that and trade this, then that's your choice. Order size I've also set to 0 here, and then I just have a trade comment and I've simply put a magic number there. That's all the input that's required for this standard grid trader. And then I include Expert.mqh, which we'll get to in a moment, and then in these event handlers, onInit, onDinit. For the onInit, all I need to do is create an expert, which is a new C expert, and I'm passing in the level points, order size, trade comment, and magic number. And then I return expert.init result. So this is the initialization result that you would set in an onInit, and I set that inside the expert. In onDinit, I just need to delete that expert, and in onTick, I need to call that expert's onTick method. So now all the work is happening inside this Expert.mqh class. And now this is Expert.mqh. I include frameworks, and remember I've already set the values for which framework version number I have. So here I can simply say Orchard Frameworks framework.mqh, although really it's not needed because I've already included that at the higher level .mqh file. I'm also including Leg.mqh. As I said, for the grid trading, it's much easier to write this with a buy leg and a sell leg and deal with each of those independently than to write one block of code that handles both. And here is the Leg.mqh, so we'll get to that in a moment as well. My CExpert class inherits from CExpertBase. The two values I'm adding in here are both of type CLeg, and I have a buy leg and a sell leg. Here's the level size that I'm setting, because the ExpertBase doesn't include a level size because the ExpertBase is not specifically for grid trading. And I'm defining the loop function here. The constructor CExpert takes level points, order size, trade comment, and magic. And now if we go down to the constructor, you can see that these arguments are the same arguments that are used in the ExpertBase. So I'm simply calling the constructor for ExpertBase, which deals with setting those for me. And then the level size, because in the inputs, let me go back to the inputs here. In the inputs, level points are actually points. And I want to convert that to a price value. So there is a points to double function, which is contained inside CCommon. And I have access to CCommon because CExpertBase inherits from CCommon. So I'm converting level points to level size, and then I'm setting the buy leg to a new type CLeg, passing the level size, the direction, position type buy, order size, trade comment, and magic number. And then the same for sell leg, and the only difference here is that I'm setting this as a position type sell. And then I simply set mInit result to init succeeded. I have nothing here that's failing, so I'll just set that to init succeeded, and that's the return from the expert. In the destructor, I just want to get rid of those buy and sell legs, so just to delete buy leg and delete sell leg. And the loop, all I need to do here is call the onTick method of the buy leg and the onTick method of the sell leg, and they'll just work independently then. Now, let me go back to the diagram again. I said I would begin here and open a buy and a sell. Remember that I open the buy at the ask price and sells open at the bid price, and then they will each close when their appropriate closing price reaches the next level, which means that over time the buy and the sell are going to drift or come closer together depending how the spreads move. So don't expect them to always open and close at exactly the same price. In fact, they almost never will. They will move independently. Not by a lot, but they will move around. So now we go to Leg.mqh, and this is where all the work happens. Also including frameworks, but again, not necessary because I've included it in the MQH file. I only put this here because I can run compiler checks on these MQH files. It won't produce a compiled output, but it will do a syntax check for me. But if I don't include this file, then the syntax check will fail. So my class CLeg inherits from CLegBase, which you'll remember in turn inherits from ExpertBase, which inherits from Common. I have the level size here, and then some useful variables. A count, which tells me how many legs I have, or how many entries I have open for that leg. An entry price and an exit price. So this tells me, the entry price will tell me at what price level when I hit that I should open another trade, and the exit level will tell me at what price I hit I should close the trade that's in profit. Close all I have inherited from ExpertBase, and I've implemented my own version here, and that just passes in the price. Open trade, again just passing in the price. Recount, which will check to see which trades I currently have open, and you'll see this soon. And then loop, which will do the processing for me. The constructor here, level size, and then position type, order size, trade comment, and magic. And these arguments, leg type, order size, trade comment, and magic, are the same arguments you would pass to the parent class as the constructor. The only thing I'm adding here is the level size. So I'm trying to stay with a format where at each child I add the new arguments at the beginning of the list, and everything after that are the arguments that will go to the parent. And here is the constructor, double level size, and then leg type, order size, trade comment, and magic. And you can see I'm simply passing those with colon CLegBase. I'm passing them to the constructor for the parent class. I'm passing the leg type, order size, trade comment, and magic, and then I don't need to worry about them any further here. The only thing I need to do is capture that level size, so mLevel size equals level size, and then recount. Now, just for the demonstration video here, I have ordered the functions so that I can look at functions that don't call other functions first. I often struggle with whether I should work on these experts from top to bottom, or whether I should show you the minor functions first and work my way up. Today I'm going to show you the minor functions first and work my way up then through other functions, so by the time we get to the actual processing of the expert, all of those have been written. If you download this from Git, they won't be in the same order in the file. But the first function, recount, calls no other functions in here. I use this at the beginning, as you've seen here when we first load up the expert, and it will scan the trades that you already have open to determine how the grid is set up. So this handles restarts. I also call this periodically as I open or close trades, just so that I can do a recheck on what's there rather than make sure I hold everything in memory. So I begin by setting the count, the entry, and the exit to 0. I'm setting a high price and a low price, and then a lead and a trail price. Now the lead will be the leading trade, and if this is the buy leg, the leading trade is the high trade, and if it's sell leg, the leading trade is the low trade, and the trail is the opposite then. I'm doing a simple loop through the positions. I'm using the PositionInfo class. Remember, this is defined in the parent ExpertBase class, and this is actually of type C PositionInfo custom, which is my own modified version, which includes this total function, and that is so that I've got compatibility between MetaTrader 4 and 5. In MetaTrader 5, to get open positions, there's a function called positions total. MetaTrader 4 doesn't have that, it has orders total. So to maintain compatibility, I've created this total method that lets me call a single function that gives me that number for MetaTrader 4 or 5. So from PositionInfo.total -1, so I'm beginning at the end, while I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus. Beginning at the end, counting down. It's what I typically do when I'm looking through positions or orders. Ticket is PositionInfo.SelectByIndex I. If ticket is less than or equal to 0, that means there was nothing found at this index position for some reason. And if ticket comes back as less than or equal to 0, then continue, which will move to the end of the loop and then come back here for the next iteration of the loop. And then this check, if PositionInfo.symbol is not equal to my symbol, because there could be other trades open, or if the magic number is not the magic number for this expert, or the position type is not the same as this leg type, and obviously we'll have both buy and sell open, so half the trades are not going to be for this leg type. So if any of these, then simply continue, which again will move back to the next iteration of the loop. If we get to this point, then I have found a trade that's been opened by this leg of the grid trader. So mCount++, just add 1 to the count of trades. If high, now I'm tracking here the highest price of any trade that I have open. If high is equal to 0, which means I haven't set it yet, or the open price for this position is greater than high, then I simply set high to be that price open for this position. And then I do the same but in the opposite direction for low. If low is equal to 0, then it hasn't been set, or if the price open is less than the current low, then I set low equal to PositionInfo.priceOpen. I've written it this way because at this stage I don't want to worry too much about decisions in terms of am I in a buy leg or a sell leg. The high trade is always going to be the highest price trade, and the low is always going to be the lowest price trade, regardless of whether I'm buying or selling. I take care of deciding whether they're the lead or the trail in the next block of code. So down here in this block, if count is greater than 0, and here I test, if I'm on a buy leg, then the entry price is the lowest price minus the size of a level. So I'm saying here, I'm buying, so I'm going to set an entry price below the lowest buy that I have on the grid. So if the price falls to that level, I'm going to buy again. The exit price then is the low plus that level size. So as soon as my price gets to at least one level above the lowest price trade, I want to close that lowest price trade. So that's my exit point. Else, so if I'm not position type buy, then it must be sell. The entry is the high plus the level size, which means on a sell, I'm going in the opposite direction. And if the price rises one level above the highest price trade I already have, then I want to take another sell. And with the exit, that's high minus the level size. So if the price falls below the highest price trade, then I want to close that trade. So that's everything for recount. Once I've been through that, I know where my grid is. Assuming that I've come back in here and I've set the level sizes, I know where the highest and the lowest trade are, and I know where I'm going to enter a new trade and where I'm going to exit any existing trades. The close all function, I'm calling it close all because when I hit that exit, in most cases there's only going to be one trade behind me, but just in case something's happened and the terminal's been closed down for a while and I might now have opened it up and the price has moved in favor by more than one level, I want to close all the trades that are in profit. So I'm calling this close all. Here's the closing price, which I'll set in the function that calls this. The same loop here for I counting down from positions total -1 while I is greater than or equal to 0. The same selection. If I can't select, then continue. I'm testing whether the symbol, magic, and the type match, and if not, then continue. So I'm just looking for trades that are for this expert advisor and this leg. I get the ticket number with PositionInfo.ticket, and then I have to have some conditional logic based on whether this is a buy or a sell leg. So if we're in a position type buy, so a buying leg, and price minus level size, so if the current price minus one level is greater than or equal to the opening price of that trade. So if I'm one level ahead of a trade, then I will close that ticket. For a sell, it's the opposite. If price plus level size, so price plus level size is less than or equal to the opening price for that trade, then I close that ticket and continue. And after all of that, after I've closed any trades that might be in profit, then I simply call recount, and that resets everything for me. The open trade function, very simple. Just calls trade.positionOpen, passing in my symbol. I'm casting the leg type to an order type. So leg type is a position type, but when I'm opening a trade, I have to use order type. It just happens that order type buy is the same value as position type buy, and order type sell is the same value as position type sell. So I cast this to enum order type. My order size, the price, now this has been passed in again from the calling function, which we'll see soon. No stop loss, no take profit, and my trade comment. The magic number has already been set on the trade object. And then I call recount again. So every time I close a trade or attempt to close a trade or open a trade, I'm going to call recount, which will tell me exactly what I have. Now here's the loop. This is where most of the work happens. So the onTick function calls loop, and the onTick is handled in the parent class. So the parent class is calling the loop function, and this is where I do all of the work. First, I'm going to check to see if anything has to be closed. If it's a position type buy and last tick bid is greater than or equal to exit. So I've already tracked that exit price. If the bid price has gone past exit, then I close everything for that bid price. So this is the close all function. And if we're not in position type buy, if the last tick ask is less than or equal to exit, then I close all for the ask price. So I'm closing everything that's in profit here. I do that first, and then I determine if I need to open any new trades. And this is a little different. If I'm buying, if M count is 0, then I have no trades open, so I should open a trade. Or if the ask price is less than the entry price. So if I already have trades open, I'm only going to open a new trade if the price drops on the buy leg. If I have no trades, then I'll just open a trade now. There is no situation where I need to open trades if the price moves above all of the existing trades, because the first thing that will happen there is that I'll close all of those trades in profit. And then there'll be no trades open, and so that mCount equals 0 will come to effect, and I'll open a new trade. So I only really need to check the entry price if the price is falling for a buy or if it's climbing for a sell. For the sell, I have the opposite, if mCount 0 or the bid price is greater than the entry, and then I open a trade at that bid price. And that is the end of the code for the grid trader. Let me go back to here, the MQ5. I'll just make sure. Silly mistake there, I forgot. As I said, I've kept this file looking the way it did for the demonstration here. It actually needs to look more like this file. So let me do that. So what actually happened there in the compiler is that it pulled in both version 3.0.1 and 3.0.0 because I didn't have these statements. And there we go, compiled with no errors, no warnings. And I'll now go to MetaTrader and run this in the backtester for demonstration. Now I opened the strategy tester, I've got it paused at the moment. As soon as the expert started, it opened a buy and a sell because there were no existing trades. And I've set the levels at 200 points, 20 pips here. And you can see that because of the spread, the buy is already opened above the sell. That's just to be expected, and that's the way it will happen. Let me let this run. Right, I've let that run on a bit. Let me pause it again. You can see that it's come through here and taken out another buy at this level, another buy at this level, a buy here, and a buy here. But at each of these, it has closed a sell. So the sells have closed there, here, here, and here. So I've made some profit on the sells, but as I've warned, I'm now in a drawdown on all of these buys, and I will be until the price comes back up. And at this point, the price has been going up and down, and so I've been closing some buys, closing some sells. I'm probably still in a drawdown, but you can see that this grid trader is working. I've got trades opening here, closing here, trades opening here, closing down here. That's the basics of a grid trader. There are variations that will help to avoid these drawdowns, and some of them are quite interesting, and I'll get to those in future videos. But this is the basic grid trader. This code's available on GitHub. You can look in the description for the links for that. If you found this useful, please click the like button. It will help us to make more videos. And if you want to see more of our videos, then click subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when we release the next video. So thank you for watching.